I can turn around and show, so you guys will be able to see what everyone else here is up and seeing, which will be the most of what we're talking about. So we should have you covered so you can see what we're talking about. So just as a way of brief introduction for those who don't know me, I'm James Sununu. I am part of the ownership group of Waterville Valley Resort, which we have owned since 2010. I also serve on the board of directors of the resort and am fairly active in the running of the resort alongside Tim and the rest of our great team up there. In addition, we to being the principal owners of the resort, we are also the principal owners of Tyrell Development Company, which was a company that was formed in 2019 to acquire the bulk of the remaining land that was owned by the Waterville Company that was founded by Tommy Corcoran. And we acquired that land in 2019 and began this process of planning and development on these parcels in the center of town that we're going to be talking about. And also just as a little by way of history, I'm sure everyone here knows of Tommy Corcoran. Just a little bit of background on that. So Tommy founded the resort in the 60s, came in, worked with the Forest Service to get permission to build the ski resort in the forest up on the mountain, and then acquired largely all of the private land in town from the Bean family, and began his development of what we now know as the modern Waterville Valley. Tommy owned and operated the resort and developed land from the 60s right up through the 70s and the 80s. In the early 90s, not long after Town Square had been developed and most of what is currently existing in the valley had been built, the real estate crash in the early 90s put a lot of strain on him, on his company. He sold the resort and Town Square and the conference center to another company. He retained all the undeveloped land that his company owned, and at that point things sort of went off in two different directions. The resort proceeded to change hands three times, Tim? Three times between the early 90s and 2010 when we acquired it. It basically suffered from what I would call benign neglect during those years, with little or no investment or upkeep of the resort. There was some additional development of the properties that were remaining in town, but not a whole heck of a lot. We acquired the resort in 2010 from Boot Creek. We spent a number of years catching up on a lot of deferred maintenance and other problems that the resort had, but we've embarked on a fairly aggressive capital improvement campaign starting in about 2016. For those of you who know the mountain, you've seen what we've done. We have the expansion onto Green Peak. We've overhauled and updated the snowmaking systems. We've completely redeveloped and renovated the lodge. We installed the High Country T-Bar. We installed the Tecumseh Express lift this past year. So all in all, it's on the order of $40 to $50 million of capital that has gone into the resort since 2010. So it's a very significant investment on our part. We are very dedicated to the resort and the town. My family has been skiing here since I was a kid. We've had a family home here since the early 90s. We were very close with the Corcorans and shared his vision of what Waterville Valley could be as a resort and a community. And so when we acquired these properties from the Waterville Company in 2019, we wanted to, we took that vision into consideration as we started developing plans for what this would look like. And so, as a little bit of background, though, Tim and I dug up quite a few historical plans of what has gone on in the planning process for Waterville Valley since its founding. We thought that might be interesting to folks, and I'm sorry, I'm probably blocking view there, but I'll step out of the way as I do this. So, you can see here, this is a very early concept of what Waterville Valley might be when it was developed out. Tommy was thinking about alpine resorts in Europe as he thought about this. And one of the most notable things about here is the perspective here is what would eventually become Corcoran's Pond. It didn't exist back then, but they envisioned ski lifts that ran from the center of town up Snows Mountain, a whole series of ski lifts up that side of the valley, and envisioned that would all be developed out as ski slopes, not as real estate as it is now. You see what would be Valley Road coming in here, and the center of town going off that way, and the mountain is up in that direction. As they went further along, and I apologize, some of these are pictures of old plans, but You have the first sort of master plan that they developed. This is from April of 1970. You have the road coming into town here. You have elementary school. You actually have parking lots up on the side here where you have condominiums now, convention facilities, the pond, a village square that's very different from what was built out, because what it is here is it's supporting this ski lift that goes up Snows Mountain. What they call the transportation terminal, which they envisioned as a hub where buses and other transit would come in and drop people off in town to spread out to their destinations. You also have, you know, a lot of parking and condominiums and other stuff spread around here, condominium development over here where you see it now. And here's Snowsbrook coming through. And they actually envisioned the Civic Center being right here in town, right along the pond, as opposed to where it is. We all know where it is today. So that was 1970.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry about that. Let me stand on this side. So,
in front of me, I've seen this.
yeah. Just to give an idea of what they were thinking about back then, again, this is the early 70s. You see the existing ski resort here, and they were thinking about developing this entire side of the valley into another ski area on this side with multiple lifts that reach down into the center of the village and up to the mountain, and then all the development would encircle those areas. Jumping forward, I don't have anything on hand from the 80s, but jumping forward, their thinking changed completely. Snows Mountain development as a ski slope was off the table. The Waterville Company had lost control of the resort, and they were looking at developing their remaining lands. And what you see here is basically the center of town. You see Town Square and the ice arena here. This is the center of town crammed full of townhouses. And that's all that's there. It's Town Square, and all of these are crammed full of townhouses with a nest of streets through them. You have some surface parking here, you have a parking garage here. This is the first time we see them thinking about putting a gondola in to connect the existing resort with the town, as opposed to having the ski lifts going up the side of Snows Mountain. That would have been what was here. Is that? I mean, technically an easement for a ski lift still exists for that old golf hole going across the road up the mountain. So,
is the gondola track the same as the gondola track you have today?
not quite.
Okay.
Not quite. You see the ice arena here, where we have it conceptually is closer to the ice arena in Town Square. Part of that's driven by its adjacency to other areas, but part of it's also driven by what was developed over here, and now it's more. There's only so many ways you can get a gondola out of town without crossing too many rooftops or other private property. So it's that's moved around a few times. 2002, they actually took this plan to the planning board, which considered this rezoning of the center of town with these townhouses. Again, it's the center of town crammed full of townhouses. There's no other amenities. There's no other lodging. There's no other community centers here. It's just parking lots and townhouses. And that was, I gather that was not received favorably by the planning board at the time. I wasn't part of that at the time, but feedback I got was that was really not the direction they wanted to go. So jumping forward to about the 2011-12 and into the teens, the Waterville Company then completely changed tack. After the reception they got for that townhouse style plan, I believe it was after that the town changed the zoning in the center of town there. It became what we know now as C1 zoning, which is commercial, where they restricted the ability to build single family and duplex homes, because that wasn't what the town wanted to see in the center, what was supposed to be the commercial center of town. So this is their 2011-12 plan, which they carried through up until the time we purchased the properties in 2019. And the big difference here is you see a large hotel on the north side of Corcoran's Pond, a small hotel on the south side of Corcoran's Pond, and then a gondola terminal on the other side of Village Road from Town Square. And these are mostly condominium buildings with a little bit of commercial space here, and parking garage here to start to deal with the increased parking requirements for all of these facilities. You still have a mixture of surface lots and other types of parking here, some green space around there. The hotel along the pond there. So that was the plan that was in place at the time we acquired this. We had many long conversations with Bill Cantlin, who was running the Waterville Company after Tommy Corcoran passed away, about their, how they arrived at this. And that's when we began a session where we came up with our initial master plan, which we showed to the town's planning board in late 2019. This incorporates many of the same elements. It has several hotels. We relocated a hotel here, and I'll explain why in a second. There's still some Green Peak residential here. These are condominiums, mixed-use buildings. These are commercial buildings. This is a seasonal ice rink that can be outdoor ice in the winter. It can be covered with AstroTurf. It can be a performance venue in the summer. And we have some green space in here. And this is where we first relocated the gondola terminal to be more adjacent to Town Square and connected to this large hotel, which we've moved away from the pond and into the center here. One of the driving factors of why we've...
Just your voice carries better when you're on.
Okay, sorry. One of the driving factors in deciding this is, in addition to being part of the community, we are operating the resort as a business. And one of the things we hear from our guests these days, and we see in the ski resort business, is guests who would like to come, park their car, stay in their hotel, and have everything in a central core and walking distance. They don't want to drive from place to place to place while they're visiting. So what we did was we pushed parking out to the perimeters and tried to move a hotel in here, and that's why you have a hotel here on one side and some other mixed use on this side and some residential, but you have a central, what we call the village green here. And that started to thinking about this. So as everyone knows, right now, Town Square is a hub of activity in the middle of town. And what we looked at was building multiple hubs of activity around that. You still have Town Square here as a location of activity, but you also have another hub of activity around this venue here. In the winter, you can have ice skating with bonfires around it, bonfires around it, and you can have cafes that are serving beverages, and people can sit out here while their kids skate, things like that. You can have summer events right in here. You can have recreational things going on here. So that was part of why we did what we did in terms of reconfiguring many of the same elements that the Waterville Company had. Feedback we got from this, from the town, and in previewing it with partners who might want to develop some of these properties with us, the hotels, the mixed use, was about the density. And the town itself has long desired the maximum possible density in the core of town for development in that C1 district. That's part of the town's master plan. That was part of the town's pedestrian study that looked at how to make the town more attractive and walkable and friendly to both residents and visitors. So we looked at that and we came back now. And the only way to increase density here, because of these buildings and the parking requirements for these buildings, we have surface lots here that satisfy the parking requirements under the town zoning ordinance. There's a formula for, a hotel or a residential or a commercial building. You look at the formula about how many parking spaces you're required to provide. We plug those in, we get some numbers, and these parking lots roughly meet those parking requirements for this plan. So if we wanted to go with greater density, we had to look at, we can make some buildings bigger or add more buildings, but then we also have to look at the parking situation. And that brings us to the plan today that I'm sure everyone wants to talk about, which is what we showed to the planning board last month and to the select board today. Folks, you over there can see what we're looking at here. So it has many of the same elements. We've reconfigured them a little bit. We still have a small hotel here. We have a large hotel here. We have some other buildings here. But let me start from the middle and work my way out. The gondola terminal here, which again has been an aspirational aspect of the resort and the community for many years. It's been part of the town's master plan for many years, hoping for a gondola connection or some kind of aerial lift connection up to the mountain. The goal is to take cars off the road that drive up to the mountain and have to park in the parking lots. Folks can come to the center of town on a shuttle bus, or if they're in walking distance, walk to the gondola terminal, hop on a gondola, a nice cabin, insulated from the environment for a nice ride up to what we plan as a mid-station that will be just above the split in the road along the road up Ski Area Road, where Tripoli Road splits. Right off to the left there, as you're heading up to the mountain, there's basically a plateau there where there'll be a mid-station and a new base area, second base area for the resort. From there, the gondola will take a turn and head up to the top of Green Peak and land at a top terminal that's right near where the Green Peak Triple lands. And then there'll be trails cut into that side of Green Peak that faces the town. So you'll be able to see now, right now you look out from town, you can barely see those trails at the top of Mount Tecumseh, but you'll be able to see the trails right there on Green Peak, and the gondola will take you across the Mad River to that base area where you can get off. There'll be new, base area amenities there. You can also just take it right up to the top of the mountain and begin your day skiing. So that terminal is in the permitting process. We're working with the Forest Service to get that gondola permitted. It's a major, major goal of ours to build that gondola. We think it's very transformational for the resort as a destination. And so we have that gondola terminal here. We tried to centrally locate it as much as possible. It's adjacent to what exists there, but also what we hope to build, and put it in a location where folks can easily access it.
What's the capacity of the gondola, like people per hour?
3,000 roughly.
Thank you.
Will people be charged to use
3,000
it?
per hour.
Oh, yes.
So why wouldn't somebody just park for free?
No, if you have a ticket, if you have a lift ticket or a pass, it's just like a ski lift, you can get on it. But if you don't, if you're not a skier, for example, a summer seasonal, someone up here in the summer who wants to take it for a tourism ride.
Wants to go and watch your kids.
There'll be a foot passenger ticket. that
Yeah,
you
there'll be a
can buy.
passenger
Just like we
ticket.
have
You won't
here.
have to buy a ski ticket, no. There'll certainly be a passenger. So we start there.
The one in Canada hasn't been
Thank you.
Here,
Good point, thank you very much.
And a quick reminder, we will have a time at the end for questions. So do your best to hold on tight to those questions.
All right, so what we have here is, we have the central gondola that goes out of town here up to the mountain. We have the similar type, what we call the boutique hotel. It's a 75 to 80 room hotel. On that site, it could have amenities such as a spa, something that the resort is lacking. And just as an aside for folks who are wondering about hotel rooms, the Valley right now has probably fewer than 200 true hotel rooms. There's, things like the Golden Eagle, there are units for rent there, stuff, but that's not a hotel. It's not the kind of hotel people expect. There's no amenities, there's no limited services. The feasibility studies we have looked at said the Valley can support upwards of 1,000 or more hotel rooms. So we are way short of the capacity we need to service the demand that exists for people to visit Waterville Valley. We know for a fact that the resort has guests who stay in Plymouth and Thornton, renting hotel rooms there, even though they're skiing here, because they can't find a satisfactory hotel room in Waterville Valley. So we have that hotel here. We have what we call the Lodge Hotel, which is a larger hotel and conference center. On this side, again, we've pushed it in towards the middle where we have this green space in the middle of the village. There's meeting facilities and club facilities in this building here, adjacent to the gondola. The gondola exists on a raised, it will be one level up from street level, so there'll be a plaza underneath it where people can pass through. But by raising it up, we raise the profile, they can be up in the air and get out of town at an elevation very quickly, so people can pass underneath it. Obviously, you've seen a ski lift that comes out, you can't be walking right under there, or you're gonna get clobbered. We have the same idea of a seasonal ice rink here, surrounded by some mixed-use commercial buildings, could be cafes, retail, restaurants, any of those things. We've added an aquatic center for indoor and outdoor swimming and other activities here in the middle. And at either end, we have condominium buildings here and here. This building is also where we would envision an indoor-outdoor adventure center for resort guests or anyone to enjoy adventure amenities, climbing walls, miniature golf, all those kinds of fun resort activities that we want to have here. Some other elements here, before I just plunge right into questions here, is I'll anticipate some of the early questions. We have a building here where we've identified a possibility of mixed use where folks have asked about, well, what about, you know, the post office in Town Square when I pop in to get my stuff? So we've envisioned that because parking is pushed out to the perimeter, it's not as easy to pop into Town Square, moving things like post office and groceries to a building out here that has its own dedicated parking, and it's very easy for people to pop into and pop out of, and do their daily business with those types of activities that they do. We conceptually, and I will reiterate, this is conceptual, so none of this is something that's going to the planning board anytime soon, but we envision actually cutting off Village Road. And what we would do is create turnaround points at either end where shuttle buses can drop off people to go to the gondola terminal. We would envision a larger fleet of smaller buses that travel around more frequently in town and bring people here instead of having to make the drive all the way up to the mountain, which can be a 30-minute round trip. This way you can be, 5 minutes from the gondola terminal anywhere you are in town. We would obviously need the permission of the town to do that. They've seen this plan. They know that at some point we may be coming to them and asking them about whether they would be willing to do that. Let's see here. The other reason we've cut off Village Road there is this creates a pedestrian-only core of the town that starts over here and it continues all the way around the pond and right back here. This would be pedestrian-only, walkable, designed to be highly walkable and pedestrian-friendly and
Bikes.
What?
Bikes.
Well, we would probably envision more walking, just like you have to walk through Town Square now, because you're gonna have sidewalks here that are probably gonna have people, so it's probably more the kind of thing where you're gonna walk your bike through, maybe? I don't know, we haven't got to that level of detail yet, but that is another goal of the town's pedestrian study and the town's master plan, is to improve the pedestrian friendliness of the community as a whole. And that was some of the thinking that went behind, proposing to cut off Village Road and create that pedestrian-only core. The other reasons for that is, I spoke to you earlier about a hub of activity that you have here in Town Square. Well, now you have a hub of activity here, you have a hub of activity that could be around this mixed use and commercial and retail, and this ice rink, which could be, activities in the winter and events in the summer. And you have a third hub of activity around this, which could be recreation land here for activities and the aquatic center. So you have these multiple hubs, and by taking Village Road out, it makes it that much easier for folks to move between all of that's going on. To facilitate that movement, the other thing we've done is we've removed what we call Building R from Town Square that contains the current restaurants, to open up Town Square, to make the gondola platform more accessible, and to move restaurant facilities or spread them around so they're not all concentrated in one place. We have a possible restaurant here along the water, restaurant in the hotel. There could be a restaurant or cafe in one of these buildings. There could be a small restaurant in this building. So we want to spread that out so people are spread out and they're moving between all of these things that provide them a great experience, whether they're guests or whether they're folks in town who are just coming down to Town Square to enjoy the day. So I think, and that brings us to the parking. So as I said, parking was pushed out to the periphery to create that pedestrian core and to put everything in a concentrated place so people who are visiting can park their car and be walking distance, easy walking distance to everything that's going on here. But to achieve the density that's achieved by these buildings, which have, you could have 300 or more hotel rooms here, 75 here. Between these buildings, there's 150 or 200 condominium units potentially. We need to think about structured parking garages. And I know that's probably something people want to ask me about. So you can't see it here, but there's underground parking underneath all these major buildings to provide space, dedicated spaces to those uses. There's continued surface parking here and here and here. But to achieve the number of parking spaces we need, we looked at 2 parking garages that would be 1 underground level, 1 surface level, and up to 2 above ground levels. And that is because we have 2 levels above there because that's how we achieve the formulaic parking requirements by the town for all of this development. Now, that number can change. It's up to the planning board and the town to determine how much parking is needed. Right now, there's shared parking between Golden Eagle, Snowy Owl, Town Square, Ice Arena. So it's kind of hard to say exactly how many parking spaces are required when you add all that up, and then they share them. So if there are shared parking requirements that the town allows us to blend into here, these could be not as tall as they are planned to here, but for conceptual purposes, to achieve the parking that this plan on paper requires according to the town's requirement, that's why we have those garages there. And did I leave anything out, Tim?
I'm sure you did, but we'll get to it.
I have a
So-
question. You took that building out that has,
Yes.
did you consider taking the ice arena out? Because it seems like the ice arena is in a prime real estate location that's cutting off a lot of interesting things.
So the question is, did we consider taking the ice arena out, because we took out that building R in this conceptual plan? It's a very good question. However, we don't own this. So I am not gonna plan something that removes somebody else's building. Actually, the town owns this building and they lease it to the hockey academy. So that would be a future discussion with the town about how they want to manage this piece of property. So that belongs to them. I agree that it's a great piece of real estate, both because it's adjacent to the gondola and on the pond, and be happy to try to come up with ideas for it, but I already presumed to remove Village Road. I didn't want to presume to remove the town's ice arena.
James,
Wait, oh, sorry. wait.
James, are you in a space where it's time for
Yes,
folks
so
to
I
ask
think I
questions?
covered
Okay.
everything. Like Tim said, I may have missed a couple of things, but I figured we're better off getting to the questions than me continuing
Okay,
to go.
so we have,
So-
I will ask that folks keep in mind, we'll take questions for about a half an hour. And at that point, if there are some very pressing questions, I haven't discussed this with James yet, but I would say either email me and we can pass on, but please collect your questions.
I'll do my best
People
to
are,
answer as many questions as we
yeah,
have tonight. So-
absolutely, thank you.
So, one second. So, sorry, one second. Let me just start over here and work this way across the room, okay?
Hi.
Yeah.
Just have 3 questions or thoughts. First of all, one of the prettiest views of the valley is coming in Valley Road.
Yes.
So it just seems to me putting a multi-level garage in one of the prettiest spots just does not make sense and it's unattractive. And then I'll get to
Are you
the
talking
views.
about this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seems not to kind of fit into the character of the valley. The second question or thought is, why not run the gondola to the summit? If you're gonna have a gondola, run it all the way to the top of the Tecumseh.
Yep.
And then the third part is, right now you sort of have 3 base areas. You got a base area here, you got the new one where the gondola's gonna stop, and then you have the old current base area. Seems like, 1, there's a lot of parking,
Yeah.
2, it's kinda spread out.
Okay, I'll try to hit all those. So yes, this is a nice view. We've tried to preserve the view. There's actually a view easement across the pond here, looking up. And what we would try to do is achieve, you know, with the grade here, the roads above here, we would try to achieve something where this garage was not, you know, sticking as you know, we'd try to minimize how far up above, you know, grade this is gonna go, relative to the road. So that's all part of the future planning process when we get to the details about, those things. I'll just note, and I know parking's a big, issue. You know, structured parking has been contemplated in towns for decades. It was in all the original parking agreements with the Snowy Owl, the Golden Eagle, not the Golden Eagle, the Black Bear, Town Square, all specify that future structured parking is a possibility. And so that the landholder here has the right to move the shared parking locations into structured parking in the future. The town's pedestrian study envisioned structured parking. So it's not a new concept. I know it's probably new to a lot of people, the idea of parking garages in the center of town. But it's not something that we just thought of, you know, out of the blue. So to the other 2 quick questions, geography, getting over Green Peak and then down and back over to the top of Tecumseh is not feasible for the gondola.
Can't go up Sunnyside?
But you're gonna go down into Valley Run and then back up.
Anything's possible.
Anything's
Yeah.
possible,
It's
but
not rational.
yes. The multiple base areas actually help because it spreads skews around the mountain. It helps reduce congestion in particular areas on the mountain. So it's actually a very beneficial thing to have several different areas where people can funnel down at the bottom of the mountain. So,
Can I grab the view?
what view?
He asked about the view, about the
Yeah.
garage parking.
Yes.
the view. When we talked about the view, we did view profiles of what it would look like as you drove in. And one of the big things about this view is the view starts right in here, right? As you come towards Corcoran's Pond and you see the great village that we have now, and the village in behind, and Osceola comes in the background. As you come around the corner, the view slightly changes. We want to excite the kids with the amenities of the adventure center that we'll have right here. As you come further around, the view right around here really starts to change towards Osceola.
Yeah, the golf
And you start to
course.
see Osceola. So we got to put parking somewhere.
Golf course.
This one kind of seemed like the best spot.
Two questions. Two questions.
Yeah,
One,
sorry.
it's very difficult to see density from from this plan.
Yes.
You have an elevation where you can see
Not yet, but we are working on 3D models that will show what they call the massing of the buildings.
Okay, second question has to do with the hotel rooms and the extra condos. What effect will that have on the wastewater treatment plant, and how do you intend to do something about that? With all the extra.
We have kept in discussion with the town all the way through developing this master plan, our original master plan and this master plan, and they have incorporated the possibility of all of this development into their calculations for the maximum capacity of the wastewater treatment plant. So they are designing with the possibility of absorbing all of this extra.
Will there be any financial remuneration to the town for all of this? Will you be, the developers do anything for the town to help mitigate the costs?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that because we have not gone to the planning board with a specific proposal. That would be a discussion with the town when we are proposing specific construction. So we don't know. We haven't, you know.
Done really well. You know, it's kinda like
Yes.
something wrong.
Sorry to beat the drum on the garage, but, it's a little wishy-washy on how many stories. Can you talk in terms of
Yes.
feet off the ground, how long it's gonna be? And then also, what kind of considerations would you be doing for the visual look of the
Yeah.
garage? Is it gonna be
Yes.
like a shushy barn
No,
wood?
I
Is
get
it
it.
gonna
No,
be beautiful?
good
Or is it
question.
concrete?
Two levels above ground, so the top deck would be 20 feet, I'm guessing. I'm not an engineer, so I
park
don't
on
know.
top of that
Yeah,
deck?
yes.
So it'd be open air on the top of the
Yes, it would be
deck?
open air on top of that. Not covered on that top level. That top level would be open air. And visually, yes, we have thought about how to, what the sides of the garage would want to look like, not just bare concrete, that there's a lot of ways to put essentially siding, trim, other visual, landscaping, other things around them to minimize the visual impact.
So you're thinking 20 feet plus parking on top of that 20 feet?
No, 20 feet.
Well, including the cars.
Yeah, well, yes, including the cars, I guess.
Yeah, okay, so.
Sorry.
If I
No,
may.
Oh, two questions. Number one, are all the old conference center and all those going, or are they staying?
For now, they're staying, but, depending on, one of the benefits of this conference center is it can host larger conferences than we're capable of in the existing conference center. So it might be kept around as a secondary venue, but it also could be redeveloped in the future.
Okay, and then second question, of course, is church or chapel? Are you?
Thank you, that's the one I forgot to.
There's one.
So just very recently, so we had talked to the chapel folks in the past, not because of our property, but because they were looking to do the chapel over here by the pond on some town land, and that hasn't progressed. But recently, Katie Smith and I talked about the idea of incorporating the chapel into this property here. And so what we thought was we would try to incorporate the chapel into the design of this boutique hotel. As everyone probably knows, we already host weddings in the arbor there. That's still envisioned to be a outdoor wedding venue, but by adding the chapel there and working with the chapel committee and stuff to add that, it's actually a win-win. The town gets a chapel that they can use, and it becomes an alternative or indoor venue for weddings. Right now, our alternative venue for bad weather for a wedding is the conference center, but it really makes it very attractive to folks who want to have a wedding if they know if it rains, they're going to be able to go into a nice chapel and things like that. So we've definitely started to incorporate that into that site.
Amen.
Yes,
I noticed you're moving the post office and the grocery store and that stuff.
possibly.
When you do that, are you planning to take any of the buildings down that we have already? And the second question is, you have an aquatic center there, and we have the athletic club.
Yes.
How is that gonna work?
So to the post office, we would envision, this space here would get reused. We've taken one building out of this plan, but we expect these other buildings to remain. We expect there to be more demand for other kinds of retail or other, commercial retail, restaurants, things like that would fill that space. The aquatic center, if we have increased visitation through several hundred more hotel rooms, the pool at the athletic center is not gonna be able to keep up with that. So we need to add on additional capacity to serve guests with things like, especially in the summertime, water amenities are huge for families, so providing additional opportunities for that is part of that whole equation. Yes?
Number of visitors, how much increase in the number of visitors to the valley? Either answer in percentage or hard numbers.
That's a very tough calculation. We would certainly have, on peak times, hundreds of more visitors filling these hotels and condominiums, if not thousands more. You're talking about 800 beds in these hotels, hundreds more beds, maybe 1,000 beds in these condominiums, which we'd expect to be full at peak times. Now, some of that could be people who are currently staying outside the valley and now just staying in the valley. So what does that translate into? Increased actual visitation? Again, hard to say, but Tim?
So our average visitations around the valley are ranging between 50 and 60%, so just use easy numbers for 50%. Take the total units that we have in the VHB plan, this plan, of 668 more rotating units, you're about 120,000 extra visitations per year. That's a rough conceptual number.
Very.
Can you describe Building A? How many units? What is it?
Building
How
A.
many stories?
It is, you have it too? I didn't bring my printout.
No problem. Building A is 5 stories.
5 stories. It is mostly condominium units, but also some mixed use for retail or restaurant or commercial.
So it's so it's 4
Yeah.
stories of livable space with 1 story of parking, or is the
No, parking is underground.
Okay.
That's a
So
good
it's-
question, I'm
yeah.
not sure. It's 4 stories. of livable
Yeah,
spaces.
well, but the ground floor could be living space or it could be commercial space. There's a
Okay.
possibility to make the ground floors of any of these buildings mixed use.
So the parking garage connected to Building A is going to be exclusive for Building A?
No, not necessarily. There'll be underground parking, probably exclusive for Building A, under Building A.
So who's going to use a parking garage connected to it?
Well, it can be used, we have parking here that accommodates the Snowy Owl. We have an obligation to provide parking, a certain number of parking spots to the Black Bear.
Yep.
We've pushed parking out here, so it can be secondary spots for this building, depending on how many units and what the town requires for the number of parking spots per unit. This can be, you'll have some of those parking spots underground and some of those parking spots in the garage. But it won't be exclusive to Building A.
Will it be public parking?
little veil.
Will it be Black Bear parking?
We don't envision restricted parking, much like most of the lots today are open. I would envision, and we haven't, this is conceptual, we haven't figured out the details of parking, which spots go to who, and things like that. Those are details that will be worked out, so I'm not promising anything, but most of this parking would likely be shared parking the way the parking lots are shared now.
Okay, great. So you build a garage.
Can you start with one
So
question per person?
Yeah,
We're losing
yep.
over here.
Okay, great.
Okay.
One more question. Whoever gets assigned those spaces, do they own the cost of ownership over time?
I don't know that. Yes?
Yes, at the budget meeting and town meeting, there was a discussion about affordable housing for workers.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're gonna need a lot
How
of
about we
that.
talk about that in September?
That's a
That
great
sounds like a good
idea.
topic for September.
I will pump that a little bit to Tim, who'll be here in September. We are certainly thinking about workforce housing and what is needed for the valley. There's, in the core here, it's not envisioned, but we're looking at a number of potential locations for that, both within and outside the valley, to address that need.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, the question was, what about workforce housing? So sorry about that, I'm not doing a good job of repeating the question.
For those people who own property here and pay taxes, is it going to be that the owners who pay taxes here can vote on whether they agree with that? Many owners probably like the old
the valley as is, he does not,
Yeah.
not want this kind of development.
Well, the process,
And I'm one.
yep, the process would be that as specific parts of this plan, sorry, the question is about who's, voting on or deciding what gets developed. There's a zoning ordinance, there's a planning ordinance. All of these projects would go to the planning board with specific plans that would be proposed. There would be public hearings and discussion with the planning board to approve. I will just note that everything you see here, as envisioned, is expressly permitted under the zoning ordinance for C1, which is this zone. This has all been envisioned to, things like this have always been envisioned to happen in this zone in town. Yes?
I
Ma'am.
think that Judd was first.
Okay, sorry.
I wanna know who's gonna pay for the infrastructure requirements, right? We're gonna have more traffic, more roads,
Yep.
more sewage, more water, more police, more fire. We only have one
Yep.
ambulance as it is, like, we need more
Yep.
infrastructure.
All of that is paid for right now through taxation, and this is gonna add a large amount of taxable property to the property base in town, all of which will be paying taxes towards those increased services that are needed. There's literally several $100 million of value here that goes into the property tax base in town. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why the town would like to see density here, because that was part of the master plan for the town, but also because that maximizes the tax base of the town. And as everyone knows, there's not a lot of private property in Waterville Valley relative to what you see in most towns, and this is the last vacant property where the property tax base of the town will actually be elevated.
Right, but as it's building up and we're
Yeah.
increasing infrastructure then, and you're still not paying taxes.
Correct.
yet.
Well, I pay taxes every, I mean, we're the biggest taxpayer in town right now. But most of the infrastructure here, the stormwater infrastructure, utility connections, those are all paid for by the developer. Those aren't paid for
Okay,
by
that's
the
what I'm
town.
asking, yeah.
So,
Oh.
sorry.
Yeah.
Tina?
Hi there, we've had this really great little theater in the valley for a while. Donna Devlin has done this
Yes.
in honor of Mark Dakota. Is there gonna be any kind of a space for that, or for theater, or
Yep.
people coming in to perform?
We would envision possible performance venues on the seasonal ice in the summertime. We can have a performance stage adjacent to
It wouldn't
this.
just be for bands?
Well, no, it could be for anybody who wants to use it. And for anyone who's been up to Stowe in the last few years in Vermont, they've built out the base of Spruce Peak. This is, I directly stole this idea from them. They have this wonderful seasonal ice right in the middle of that development. They have a great performance stage right at the end. They have great events, they have concerts, they have all kinds of stuff for kids, for grown-ups, all sorts of things happening there. You could also have a performance venue up against the green space here, the Village Green. So there's multiple possibilities to have performance venues,
Instead of
yes.
10 doing it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How many years?
Sorry.
How many years of construction do you anticipate? Tim's lifetime
Yes.
or?
Well, in 1970, from this master development plan, they said 5 to 10 years.
For the whole town to be
I
built
think
out.
that's it, right?
We're talking about many years. I mean, you're talking about a decade probably to get here. I mean, there's permitting, engineering, there's a lot of time that goes into, we're working on permitting for this gondola right now.
Hey, let's keep it down so people can hear. I know we're having a hard time
Sorry,
hearing
the
out
question
there.
was about how long this will take. For example, the permitting for the gondola, we're in process with that right now, but I think Tim would agree, we'd be thrilled if that were under construction in 2026. So that, it just takes time.
Yeah, I'd be doing backflips if that
Yes.
happens.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Can you discuss how the gondola will affect the homes and the condos that are there right now? It's gonna go over to Tecumseh,
No,
Osceola.
so it actually passes out of town, it only passes between two buildings.
And which buildings are
That is
those?
Osceola 1.
Osceola one
Yes,
and Tecumseh one?
Nope, just between the two Osceola 1. This is the Osceola 1 Association, which is two buildings,
Yep.
and it passes between those two buildings.
And what's gonna happen with that homeowners association?
We have talked to that homeowners association a number of times over the last few years about the idea of passing over their property. We need their permission, and we've had very good conversations with them, and we're working with them to show them, here's what it's gonna look like, here's how high it's gonna be, here's what it's.
And it doesn't go over Greenheath?
Uh,
Condos?
No, it does
No.
not. So, and that's one reason why we chose the location where we did, to get it to the landing area we want, and coming into town, impacting the fewest condos possible, gives us a landing spot right here in the center of town. Yes?
Where you have the parking lot on Valley Road, there's cross-country lessons that take place in the winter.
Yes.
As well as an ice loop. Where will those be moved to?
Mid-station.
Secondly, thank you for repairing the town clock and the rails in Town Square.
Tim gets credit for that.
And what plans does the company have to fix the buildings, because they are a little
Yes.
bit, you know, and then, I'm sorry, lastly, there's a lot of space right now for rent in Town Square. What is the company doing to actively secure tenants for those spaces?
Yeah, there's only a couple of vacant spaces right now, but.
And I would say those vacancies are pretty recent because we've been completely full in Town Square for quite a while.
How about the coffee shop on the second floor? That's been vacant for quite a while.
No, it's not vacant, it's being used by somebody, so. But sorry, to your other question, the first question, which was about the cross-country. The new mid-station area where the gondola lands will have a new cross-country center and learning center, and we actually hope to build competition-level trails and host cross-country events like we're hosting World Cup events.
With snowmaking.
With snowmaking. And Tim says thank you very much for complimenting another repair of the clock tower, and talk to him about the buildings that need repair.
Yes, just quickly, what's the estimated cost and how are you gonna finance it?
That's really all right.
up to you.
Have a good night, everybody. It's a lot. We're talking well into 9 figures for all of this. We are talking to development partners who are interested in various aspects of this. We envision participating with anyone who's doing that directly and making sure that what's being built out is, aligning with our vision that we have, but it is quite a bit of money, so I don't have any clear answers to that. When we get to specific proposals that address, that go before the planning board, we'll address those a piece at a time. Yes, sir, back there.
Was there any thought given to putting the gondola out of the hotel? That way you
Well, it's really connected to the hotel because you have this hotel you can walk through, and this is an elevated plaza. You can walk right out of the hotel into there. So
I can get some background there too.
And it's also, it's walkable right here from Town Square. And we tried to sort of centralize it, but also make it available for people who are getting dropped off here and walking over to it.
As an industry, we learned don't put terminals inside of buildings. Lions Head is a prime example of that. Lions Head and Vale. They had to ruin the entire building when the gondola failed eventually, and buildings last a lot longer than lives.
Yes.
As part of the vision, is there an intent to have a cohesive look to all of this development, where you're looking at
Yes.
different partners to work with? They may want to do different things.
No, but we would definitely look to have a vision, a cohesive vision about how the look and feel would be. We don't want just, ugly gray boxes. We certainly know there's a look and feel to the valley that we're trying to adhere to. So we hope to be able to show some possible, visuals of that in the near future. But we're very conscious of making things look attractive and consistent. So, yes.
Currently, the rec department has a lot of programs that are both for residents and for visitors. We're right now in a space that is not really big enough. We're sharing it with the school system, and we need to expand. That's going to cost a lot of money. That's going to be all taxpayer money, or will you, since you're bringing a lot of people into the town, will that be partially paid for maybe by the resort?
I couldn't answer that without knowing what the rec department's future plans would be. As I said, this is adding a ton of taxable property to the tax base, so it will all be contributing to all of the services that the town provides. Yes?
What sort of summer activities will be envisioned for up at the mountain itself, like zip lining?
Great question.
Tim.
So the main thing about Waterville Valley, and one of the reasons I live here, is it's all about the family. So as we've gone through this development phase and looking at different options of what we can do for development, we've looked at mountain biking, zip lining, treetops courses, all these things that we're seeing in mountain development right now. But recently we've kind of put a new lens on it and said, okay, let's look at it through the lens of grandparents and grandchildren. If they can't do it, if there's not excitement for both of those groups, then we should stay away from it. So we're at a point now where we're trying to pick and choose some different options that make us as unique as we already are in this valley and showcase our valley in different ways. Recently I was in Europe. I went up to Lux in Switzerland. They had this beautiful treetop walking course where they had performers out on these walking course where it was on kind of a mid-mountain area, and you could walk at the top, and they pointed out all these beautiful spots of the mountains. They also have these wooden gardens that are made as play areas for the children, but also look aesthetically very pleasing. That's what we're seeing coming out of Europe. I think that's probably the direction that we would most likely head. But in this plan, the conceptual obviously is the gondola going to the mid-station having the adventure center, having more amenities at the mid-station for that mountain adventure, going up to the top of Green Peak. At the top of Green Peak, we'd have this beautiful restaurant at the top that would have a panoramic 360 view, a nice play area up at the top, maybe that treetop walking course over at the top. Mountain biking would be a secondary aspect. It's not that we're not going to do it. We're just going to do it the Waterville way, where we have it so it's made for the families, not for, you know, the extreme. Now, could we incorporate some of that extreme in? Yeah, we can, just like we do the train parks at the ski resort now. It's not the primary goal. That's what we're looking at now.
Just back there.
This is just a suggestion. I have never in my whole life seen a parking garage that looks anything but ugly. I would suggest putting some money aside for some really large trees.
Okay, thank you.
Put it in that.
I've got some other people I have questions.
This is all great and stuff like that, but my question is that after this is all done, does that make it better or easier for somebody to come in and buy the property from you guys, and you guys sell out, and we've kind of lost this vision of the Waterville Valley?
We have no plans to sell the resort. So like I said, I have skied here since I was a kid. My family has had a home here for 30 years. We expect to have our home here in perpetuity. So we are committed to this valley. I'm not the only owner. There's other owners of the resort, but we are the principal owner and carry a lot of weight in that. And so we aren't looking to build this just so we can sell it to a big company. We have no interest in selling to a Vail or anything like that. So we cherish our status as an independent resort. We love being an independent resort, but the reality is it's a very competitive industry, and for us to continue to compete and be successful as a business, and frankly, you know, our business is instrumental to the success of the town. That's the reality, is we need to be able to offer a lot of this to guests, because that's what they expect when they go to a resort of our type these days. That's what we need to do to remain competitive. If we don't, we're going to be back to the days where everything here was just, you know, bare and barren and stultified, and nothing's going on. And we will lose skier visits. And you know, we saw that from the 90s through 2010, when this place changed hands multiple times and nobody cared a lick about what happened to the resort, and it really didn't do the town any favors. So,
And I
Over
think
here.
we'll take one or two more questions. That right there was a really strong point.
That was a good
So
point.
that,
Any
thank
questions
you.
over here? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Jim, to achieve this in the future, it's gonna take many charging stations.
Many charging
Quiet, please. Yes. I would anticipate that, like most development these days, that will be incorporated into the detailed site planning that goes on. You know, this is not at the level where we can determine, oh, we're gonna have a bunch of chargers here. This is conceptual, it's high level, it's more than a thought exercise, but it's an exercise in seeing what we can achieve within the goals that we have set for ourselves and within the boundaries set by the town and the community. And so I know that will be addressed as we go forward. Sorry, quiet please. Yes.
Going back to the parking garages, you could have looked at, those, if you look at the scale,
Yeah.
those are big. Forget about even the
They-
height of them.
yeah.
They're big. They're like bigger than almost all the other buildings.
Yes, they are big, and I'll just reiterate that was done this was done as part of, okay, if we're building out development like this, what parking do we need? This isn't to say this is how it's gonna end up. That will be a long conversation that we have with site planning and the planning board, and that entire permitting and approval process when we get to very specific parts of the plan, so.
But along that line, I know you said there could be some underground parking.
Yes.
How deep can you go?
You can actually go, the soil here is,
You do
yeah.
more underground and less above?
Well, you can only go so far because of the water table. I mean, it's good soil for excavating, but it's not so great because of the water table. So it's a trade-off. So, yes.
3D models to show the scale. You
Yep,
mentioned
we're working on
planning
that.
board. Is that something you're gonna make available to the folks in the town?
We expect to do probably another presentation at some point when those are done.
Yeah, one more. If we have questions about this,
Yep.
is there an email we can send to
Send
you?
to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tim and I work together. Yes, sir.
Does all of this come to town meeting for a vote for the?
It does not come to town meeting. It goes to the planning board.
So the town doesn't get a say?
Not necessarily.
Well, you get a say by electing your planning board and coming to public hearings that the planning board has when specific elements go to the planning board. As I said, this is all what they call C1 zone. All of this is envisioned in the zoning for C1. Hotels, mixed use condominiums, restaurants, retail, even structured parking is all envisioned within the zoning ordinance. So we have stayed within the bounds of that as we plan that. So specific aspects of this, when they're ready to be developed, will be submitted to the planning board, which will do its public process, and it will be up to them to approve or deny.
Public meetings.
And James,
Correct.
I'm gonna take a moment here, real quick, and let folks know, again, this was very generous of James Sununu and Tim Smith for coming and sharing this information that is in the informational stage. And for those of you who did not hear, Tim is welcoming folks to ask specific questions to him. You can email him at tsmith@waterville.com. What's that? You're already.
Well, you can also show up at the Tuesday community meetings, guys.
Yeah.
Just email me that you want to be on the community meetings. We're trying to be as upfront as we possibly can, get as much information as we can. It's
Just
very
so you know,
important.
when we first did the plan in 2019, we showed it to the planning board. COVID hit and that kind of put the kibosh on, public meetings for a while, but we revised the plan. We've had it here. As soon as this was done, we showed it to the planning board. We had another meeting today with the select board. You can find both those meetings online on the town's YouTube page and watch those. I mean, there's a lot more questions here than we got there, so this is great. This is probably the most information we've been able to share with folks, and we are happy to continue talking to people. I know some of the aspects of this aren't somebody's cup of tea, maybe the whole thing isn't their cup of tea, but this is, this is the business we're in.
Yeah, and this will, again, this information will all be available on Facebook page and on the raycenter.org.
And I have to take one more question from
Okay.
Katie Smith.
Oh, it's not a question. It's
Oh.
in the August edition of the Wigwag. That picture and the plan is in there for
Yeah.
a really good view. And if you don't subscribe to it, email my girl.
Thank you, Katie. All right. So on that note, I'm going to again thank you all for coming this evening and being cozy in here. Thank you.